It's still
We're
waiting for...
live! It says we're live. So it used to be that when you hit go live, you actually had to wait for yourself to start talking, and then like
uh,
it took it a
do
second,
an
but they fixed
audio.
that. What?
Uh, yeah, according to my YouTube thing, it's... Oh, here we go, loading in.
See, it fooled you. It got you.
Haha.
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. It's live Q&A time.
Live Q&A. This is where all of our skills about being knowledgeable about the hardware come crashing down, and we
Yes.
don't actually know anything,
Nope.
and we don't have any notes. But hey, everybody, thanks for joining.
Oh, we got this lovely, amazing background because we got cabin fever.
Well, you say cabin fever. I've been working from home for 10 years.
I used to work at so fun when I was a wee lad. I too worked from home, and then I had some helpers, and then I had a lot of helpers, and then working at home was like super weird and not appropriate. So I got an office, and now I'm alone in the office.
But is that an office at home, or is that an office elsewhere that you can't get to for now?
That is an office elsewhere that so far no one has bothered me about going into because I'm literally the only person on that side of the building.
It's the issue. So technically, my publisher has an office in Paddington, which takes me half an hour to get to. And obviously, it's closed because of this day zero bug, day zero flaw that's going around.
Day zero
But
flaw in humanity.
the issue is I'm testing, right? You can see the rigs behind me. I mean, they're off now because otherwise the fans would be too loud. But and I'm testing, if it's at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and I know I've got another 6-hour benchmark to run, I just have to go and press play. If I had an office to go to, then I wouldn't be able to do that, unless I commandeered everyone to remote access. But with Windows, that's just a pain to do en masse.
Yeah, I can't.
But
I promised myself that while no one's here, it would be the amazing time to like clean the office and organize stuff because it is just a whirlwind of chaos. And I've started that, but now it is a worse whirlwind of chaos because nothing is where anybody left it, and yet nothing has been organized. So it's just it's like, have you been robbed? It's like, no, I'm just an idiot.
I recently moved in the past year. I mean, I've spoken to you about this, and I've gone from like 100 square foot office to 130 square foot office, and somehow all the stuff I had there doesn't fit in my new place.
It's the shape of the room.
Well, no, so I've gone from a weirdly shaped room to a square room, and so technically it should be a lot easier.
Oh,
But dear man, it's I mean, all the stuff that's mine that isn't, part of my job. I've been trying to offload on eBay just so I can have some room. Or at some point I'm gonna have to start charging some of the companies that send us stuff to review storage space.
storage fees.
Yeah, I mean it's let me how about an ASRock 990 FX Extreme 9? Actually, no, I'll
Oh,
keep that because that's my AM3 testing platform.
yeah, that's a classic.
Uh, what have we got here? Dominator Platinum. I don't even think I've opened that. Uh, Desk pens. Everything's still in boxes. Oh, I know. I've had people visit my office and say it's Aladdin Cave, and and some of the time, I just say there's just too much stuff sometimes.
Well,
Oh,
I'm living proof that no matter how much square footage you have, you will fill it with stuff like that. So for me, it moves down to the basement. So like the last step before the dump is or the giveaway is it moves to the basement, and so it's like, oh, it's been in the basement for a year. Okay, I guess I can get rid of it, and I haven't used it or whatever.
you have a basement. So sorry. So I live in London. It, we have 3 floors and every room is full. We have an attic, but it's not. It's one of the ones that you can convert into storage, but not into like a living space.
Hmm.
So anyway, we should probably talk about tech stuff properly now.
Oh yeah, yeah. So many questions. It's a live Q&A.
It's Q&A, but I do have some topics that I want to talk about. Just to start our stuff going. Um, so I mean, we've already spoken working from home, and hey, cabin fever. Everybody's going, what do I do? And I see memes saying, learn a skill. And it's like, I'd love to learn a skill, but I have embargoes to do. We had Ryzen 4000 mobile embargo this week. We had Intel 10th gen embargo,
Yeah.
H series this week. There's embargoes coming up that I can't talk about.
The
Um,
11th gen leaks suggest that there are 11th gen things on the horizon, and yet
well,
there's
so,
nothing.
so the funny thing about 11th gen is, if Intel makes if Intel stays has 11th gen, I think that's a really good idea. I'm fed up with this 10th gen to 20th gen stuff that Nvidia did, and yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking, do I have a Commodore on the premises? So I do have a Commodore 64. I got it in 1987. Um, when I moved to university, I kept it at my parents. My younger brother now has it because he has it. He has like a background on his videos or whatever, of all the old systems. So he's currently got it right now. I do not have space for it, but I do have a Commodore 64, and I am old school. I used a tape drive, and I still have all my tape games.
Like I
I
say, no,
tried.
no matter how much square footage you have, you will fill it.
It's crazy. But yeah, work working from home has just turned into, I'm no longer traveling. The 200,000 miles a year that I do. So I'm at home just reviewing more stuff. But it turns out that because the China day zero flaw issue that they had over there, which is apparently fixed but maybe not be right now, um, a lot of the factories there are starting back up, and they have done over the past few weeks, which means companies are ready to launch product, which means there is more to review and test about, even though everybody back home is on lockdown.
Oh, right before the stream went live, we had a $5 question, which was, I have some old tractor computer hardware that needs an RG62 cable, ArcNet. Do you have any supplier ideas I could try? Not DigiKey. ArcNet. So this funny story, I actually have an ArcNet crimping kit and some extra BNC ends. RG62, the thing that you need to search for is new old stock RG62. And you will find spools of new old stock RG62. And you can order that and you can get a crimping kit and it's fine. You can make your own crimping kit with some shims, but it's not fun. But if you search new old stock, stuff like that pops up on eBay from time to time. And Eskimonster says that he loves us both. Thanks for being here.
Yay! Somebody loves me. That sounds pretty bad.
Well, you got to meet those deadlines. You got the embargo. You need to be so busy you don't think about things. That's the scary thing. Is it like IT during the 0-day malware has been just as busy as computer malware, and I think that won't be true forever. Because here in the U.S. we've got record unemployment, and that we're on the other side. Like in IT, I think we're on the other side of the wave. If things don't get better pretty much immediately, it's going to be very bad for IT. Very, very bad.
I don't know. You were saying that your normal work, I mean, aside from your YouTube work, is actually pretty busy right now.
Yes, and it's mainly there's a couple people that we work we take care of their online store, and they have sent home their regular staff, and the regular staff is struggling with working from home. So we're feeling like customer service roles for that client because they're just like, we're between a rock and a hard place. Can you guys help out? And it's like, well, I mean, I'm not going to say no to work. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's busy, busy, busy. I mean, so people, yeah. I mentioned before people saying learn a skill while you're in quarantine, and I'd love to be able to learn to program FPGAs. that's the kind of like I would like to take a week out to do a how to program FPGAs course because then
There's no
I'm
time.
but there's no time. But I would love to review FPGAs. So
It's like the Twilight Zone episode, except instead of broken glasses, the world is now depending on us to do things. And it's like, there was time now. And it's like, no, there's really not for you.
it's if you ever want a proper holiday, don't become a tech journalist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you've seen other YouTubers, they go on next to zero holidays, or if they do, it's a working holiday. I mean, that time, I mean, the thing that comes to my mind is Linus went up to Canada with all of his staff, and he also went to Singapore one year, um, to meet the in-laws, and he ended up just doing videos about how to install Wi-Fi in a really weird house shape. It becomes it's a work trip because in that instance, if you're not working, then you're losing money, sort of thing. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And there are a lot of people right now that, they can't work. And so it's an impossible situation for them.
do I have enough toilet paper? Yes. I get my toilet paper delivered on Amazon Subscribe and Save once a quarter, and some came about a week before the UK went on lockdown. So I have enough. I
Yeah.
have enough depending on how long it goes.
There's enough TP at the office for like 25 people for 2 weeks. So with one person, the toilet paper calculator says I'm good until September.
Yeah. Uh, so, so the funny thing is, Americans say TP as in toilet paper. I never heard that until I watched The Simpsons, because that abbreviation is not a thing here, or at least it wasn't, where I grew up. It's the phrase we have in the UK is bog roll,
Bog roll.
because if you're going to the bathroom, you say I'm off to the bog. No, not like Florida bog, just bog roll.
Nice.
And
Water closet?
yes,
What about water closet? Is that like a formal
no,
term? No.
that's what you see when you go to buy a house. Or
Okay.
loo rolls. Somebody's saying Andrex luxury bog roll. For some reason, I don't like the luxury. I prefer the regular. And yes, I buy Andrex. That's not a sponsored plug. That's just a fact.
There was I remember the first time that I read uh the I think it was the Hound of the Baskervilles, the Sherlock Holmes thing, and they were talking about going to the moor, and I was just like, what is this? Like, I need some context here. It's like the context clues about the foggy, swampy, just terribleness, and so now every time I hear bog, it conjures all the imagery from that, and so. And it's like I can't appreciate whatever the heck the moor is. Like I don't know.
But so one good thing has come out of all of this, and that's the advancement of using scientific compute to help find cures. Most of your watchers probably know that the big folding at home project is now doing calculations to try and help find active sites on the human day zero floor molecule
Yeah.
proteins. Rosetta at Home is doing something similar, and there are a couple of other minor projects. So right now, folding at home is the big one. We recently did an article because they just hit the one exaflop of compute.
I think they've gone
Which is
past 1.5 at this point.
Yeah. So the way they measure that is they take an assumed compute per CPU and GPU that's in the system, and any system that has returned work in the past 50 days is counted towards that total. I found a flaw in it though. If I take a GPU and I put it in a system, complete a work unit, and put it in another system, complete a work unit, put it in another system, complete a work unit, in their stats it's counted 3 times, but it's actually only one. Regardless, it does mean that we do have the first kind of exascale system. A couple of people on Twitter were arguing with me that it's not a proper supercomputer because the latency is so high.
I don't care. I can.
I
It's
don't. I don't
perfect
care either.
for these
I,
for the
I,
problem at hand. Latency doesn't matter.
I mean, actually, to be fair, it was HPC Guru, which, if you follow High Performance Computing, that's definitely a Twitter account you should follow. And my T-shirt says HPC everywhere and Penguin Computing, and I'm all for high performance computing. I think we all are. But as I've commandeered, so I used to be an overclocker, and then I kind of went into mining, but kind of not really. So I still have a bunch of GPUs from that, and I'm putting them to use. But because my office is shaped differently to before, it doesn't hold as many GPUs in a normal temperature. So I've had to put a system in the front room, which I
Mm.
actually use now that I have enough space for VR. But anybody who's running sort of like GTX 1060 or above, who wants free heating, folding at home is good. And Anantech is currently in a contest with Tom's Hardware. It's a month long. How much can you compute? We're currently two weeks in. We just reached the halfway, and Anantech is ahead by 20% over Tom's Hardware. So if anybody wants to join that, it's perfectly
Nice.
fine. Right.
Yes.
PC Master Race has enough people in their team. Linus Tech Tips has enough people in their team. Amazon just got on the game, and Amazon are blowing everybody out of the water. So if anybody's got any spare compute power, Team 198 is the Anantech team. We'd love to have you. We also have a forum section, and everybody's really fun. So
Joel McKinney just gave us $10 and says bog roll. And Ivan Dimitrov says, "Will i7 i9 work normally with ECC, UDIM, DDR4 memory?" No, the i7 and the i9 are crippled deliberately. Some motherboards ECC will work, but the ECC function of the memory does not work. Work in the sense that the system will post, but you get no benefit from the more expensive ECC memory. In fact, it's probably deleterious because it is slower than other DDR4 memory. So don't do that.
if I remember correctly, it's the Celerons and the Pentiums that do ECC. Do the i3s do ECC as well?
Some of the i3s, but not all of them.
Okay. Yeah, and then AMD, it depends on whether the motherboard supports it. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes. And the support is even more weird than that. There are some AMD motherboards where ECC is supported, but there's no actual reporting function. Like, it's just quietly there correcting single bit errors, but if you get more than a single bit error, it doesn't do anything. So some motherboards are better than others in that regard.
Sebastian asks, Charlie Demerijan, who is from Semi Accurate, I have no idea what kind of guy he is. His Twitter and analysis is scathing and hilarious. Is he like that in real life? Yes.
Yes. I've met him a few times in real life, and he's just like, let me give you the brain dump, and it's amazing.
Charlie has moles everywhere, and it's fun because he knows things that are many years out. And if they came from anyone else, I wouldn't give them a second of my time. But because it's Charlie, Charlie's site is called Semi Accurate because he admits that because of the way he gets some of his stuff, he knows that some of it isn't going to be true. And he's kept a record of his wins and losses, and he has more wins than losses, and he knows enough of the industry. It's the way to line up Charlie is he was friends with Tim Sweeney before Tim Sweeney got famous, and he still is. And so he's. I mean, if you want to see something amusing, search for Semi-Accurate Anantech joke. Charlie's done 3 posts where we've kind of done mini pranks on each other. It started with Anand, who started Anantech, and Charlie, and then when Anand left, I kind of took over that role. And it's the one that I did was a couple of years ago now at CES. So AMD had this sort of pre-CES learn about our stuff event under embargo, and Charlie and I always sit at the front row because I'm a journalist. My job is to get all the information, so I'm going to sit at the front row, even if that makes me uncool. But we're not in high school anymore. Charlie and I sat in the front row, Now, I had my suit on because I normally wear a suit because that's just, what we've done as a company for ages. But over my shirt, I had a t-shirt with Charlie on, looking quite angry, and Charlie sat next to me. It occurred to me I may have even told this story on this channel before. Um, but for the whole morning, Charlie didn't realize I was wearing a t-shirt with Charlie's face on it until lunchtime or the first break, where he and people said, "Oh, well, really like Ian's t-shirt," and Charlie was like, "Oh, it's just a normal shirt." And then when he got back to me, he saw me sitting down. And he looked at my t-shirt and went, it was just his face, really serious, because it was from. I took a picture of him on a previous event, and he was asking somebody a question, and he just looked really serious. He then took a photo of me and got a T-shirt of that printed out, and then wore it later in the week during the theater.
Nice.
And it's kind of stuff like that.
Jack Thorne asks, I want to run Windows and Linux at home for dev and gaming. Should I dual boot, pass through, or dual rig? Dual boot to start with. Pass through is better than ever. There's some new patches from AMD. AMD's got their fancy pants encrypted interrupt, like the pass through advanced interrupt controller thing. I forget what it is, but there's another layer of abstraction gone for handling interrupts inside of virtual machines. So it's insanely way faster. So that is finally in the Linux kernel. It's available as a patch on older Linux kernels. And so for pass through, that's like another way to have even more better pass through. But dual boot is totally fine, a fine way to start, especially for dev. And then for gaming, you can reboot and run whatever you want for gaming. But a lot of things work great on Steam. I've even done Steam in-home streaming from a VM on the same machine to the other machine because, gosh darn it, Threadripper is awesome. So yeah, and NEXE says, consider doing a folding at home on video on single board computers like the Pi W or something. I'm sure some of us have oodles of spares doing nothing. See, the problem is that there's not enough computational horsepower there for it to make a difference. Like, you could have a million Raspberry Pis, and that's still insignificant compared to one Tesla V100.
Or even one 1660 Ti.
Yeah.
It's to be honest, if you don't, if I said 2060 or 1060, yeah, 10. If you have an NVIDIA 1060 or above, then yeah, folding definitely works really well for you. Anything else, it's kind of a mix between the price of the card versus the power efficiency. But yeah. What phones do you guys use as daily drivers? I have my Huawei P30 Pro because I'm European. I also have an ROG phone too here.
Oh, the RG phone is amazing. Although I've got the FX Tech Pro 1, which has the keyboard.
So I wanted to see that at CES, but I ended up meeting with Lisa Su at that time, and I thought that was the best. That was the more important meeting to go to.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, you didn't miss too much. I like this phone. It's like the Galaxy S8 Plus. Like, it's basically the same size as an S8 Plus, but it's thicker and more brick-like. But the only thing that's bad about it is that for some reason I have a hard time holding on to it. Like, I've almost dropped it or dropped it about 50 times. And it is very lucky that I have not broken it.
I drop my phone all the time, and I've never broken my phone. The only time I broke a phone, the display didn't break. The glass rear of the phone broke. It was the HTC I want to say U11. I was in China. I was at the Forbidden Palace at Tiananmen Square, just because. And I was coming out of the subway, going up the steps, turning the phone on for the first time and signing in because I was trying to do a photo comparison. And I didn't realize that after I went up the steps, there was a step down. And I wasn't looking. So as my foot went down, my hand went up in the air, and the phone probably went up a couple of feet and then down 8 feet, and the back broke. The front was absolutely fine. I've never broken the front of a smartphone ever, and I don't understand how people do.
I've broken a lot of phones, like a lot of phones. The aforementioned S8 Plus. Lot of broken phones. Although I've only dropped the S8 Plus 3 times, and the third time it. It's very bad. Stephen
Maybe
Anderson asks, this is for the ad block, $5. Why do you think Linux has not taken off? I use Solus 4.1 and I love it. We'll come back to that. What were you saying?
it's I was on the phones thing. Maybe it's because I'm closer to the ground. I mean, people know I'm short. I'm like 5'6", which yeah.
No, it probably hurts that I just throw my phone down and then stomp on it. And it's like, why did it break?
Now, I tell you what, I can't remember what phone I had that I really hated it, and every so often I'd grab it and I'd kind of like twist it. I'd put some rotational torque through it, and one time I thought I was going to break it, and it didn't. And then a couple of nights later, I had a dream where I did, and I woke up and my phone was fine.
You woke up and your phone was broken. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, I'm sleepwalking again.
Yeah, I think Linux hasn't taken off for a couple of reasons. One, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem because of the whole, applications, users, and that kind of thing. The second thing is that a lot of people don't want to do any of the really supremely unfun stuff. So, like, the user interface, like all the different programs, it's amazing. It's a wonderful smorgasbord of applications. But a lot of programmers think that they are really great user experience designers, and sadly, they are not. And so you just get this incredible inconsistency. Even if you're using like GNOME has made incredible strides. But look at like when from GNOME 2 to GNOME 3 came out, it was like grab your torches and pitchforks, and there's still people hanging on to the GNOME 2 ideas, which means that it's not universally recognizable that all of the ideas in GNOME 3 are better. But also, inconsistency and blah, blah, blah. Windows 10, Microsoft's not really a lot better in some of these respects, because like if you use Windows 10 and you go deep enough, you can sort of drill down all the way back to the Windows 98 user experience. And it's because they haven't written a functionally equivalent Windows 10 interface for doing things, like setting the power plan, for example. Why? Linux has that in spades.
The main reason I don't use Linux is because I know that if I do something on the command line that I know I have to adjust features and stuff, if I mistype the command by one letter, chances are I'm going to break my system. It's kind of like I need an undo. Can I undo the last command?
Well, you get that with Ubuntu 20 because it's going to do ZFS. So you can snapshot your system before you do anything, and if anything goes horribly wrong, you can just reboot to 5 minutes ago. It's literally a time machine for your distro.
Also I end up using I end up downloading software that I sometimes need, or I need a tool to do a new thing, and it's only ever compiled in Windows. I don't want to compile my own version, so.
I really think Microsoft bribed VMware to. There was this feature of VMware called Seamless, and
Right.
they took it out about 3 versions ago, or for like somewhere around circa 2017. And I really think Microsoft bribed VMware to do that, because I've harassed VMware people on Twitter to be like, "Hey, can we get that back? That was a good feature," and it lets you run Windows applications from a Windows VM seamlessly, like as if they're native applications. I think something like that is gonna, like, as soon as you got that, then Linux can take over the world, and that's just not, like, nobody's interested in working on that.
It's I remember a conversation with Anand ages ago. It was the Microsoft versus the Android model, right? Or the Linux model. Microsoft want to make money through selling the operating system, and then most of the apps are free, kind of. Whereas the Linux or the Android model is you get the operating system for free, but then you pay for the apps.
Yeah.
And in the long term, you'd expect the pay for apps model to be better, but because so many people have been brought up on the pay for Windows, and Windows is really cheap now as well, because Microsoft kind of put the store into 10 and people buy apps from the store. I still don't use the Microsoft Store. The only time I use the Microsoft Store is to figure out a way to download the Windows subsystem for Linux, Ubuntu, package.
It's gotten a lot better. Like, and that's the sad thing is that Microsoft has gotten a lot better about running those things, even the graphical environment, even some of the kernel extensions, even having like the point now you can actually run the Linux kernel.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not great. It's really like it's good. It's so good. It worries me because all the cool stuff on Linux, like all the developer cool stuff that you would normally like have a bit like a legitimate, genuine, better experience on Linux than Windows, you can now have on Windows if you jump through the hoops to set that up. And so
Yeah.
that's not good in terms of moving the goal further along on a fully open source platform.
It does mean with WSL I can do some Linux benchmarks in Windows, and I can actually automate them for our testing. We already do that a little bit. The only thing is WSL, or at least the first version, for some reason has a lot of I/O overhead. So any benchmark that requires movement of data from storage to memory isn't going to be accurately represented.
Yeah.
Apparently, WSL2 fixes that. Um,
Yeah,
I
it tries to
I
give
need
you a
time.
real kernel, but
I need to spend some time to work with it. So
River
yeah.
Singh says, "What are your thoughts on lesser-known issues like EPOL's broken semantics? Also, do you think the Linux kernel might crumble under its own weight? 16 million lines of code is a lot. It's not going to
Uh,
crumble under its own weight. 16 million lines of code on a modern processor is not really a lot.
isn't Windows somewhere near 250 million anyway?
Yeah. Well, it's not even lines of code that matters. It's the call graphs. Like if you want to figure out, like, okay, has this turned into a rat's nest of complexity that we need to like just go in there with a flamethrower? It's the call graph. And so you look at a
But
call graph and you just look like I'm familiar with the call graphs for like IIS and Apache and Nginx, and they're not as neat and clean as they should be on Linux. And then you look at a call graph for IIS servicing just a simple web request, and it's like, Jesus Christ, how do so many people use this web server? This is just, I mean, it's just like somebody took a black ink pen and just all over a sheet of paper. It's like, okay, something clearly needs to change in the operating system to deal with this. And they actually put a lot of stuff really low level in Windows to try to make IIS as fast as Apache, and say nothing of Nginx. And that did not work out for them.
well, reasons why Windows Vista and Windows 8 didn't really take off, right? Too much. I think that the technical term is technical debt.
Yeah,
Code's technical debt.
yeah.
It's you don't want to be in a position where you want to maintain a code base due to it having issues. You want to be able, you need to do enough analysis on it beforehand. Um, uh, a few people may know the program Y Cruncher, which is used for calculating records for Pi. The
Oh yeah.
guy who writes that, Alex Yee, I've met him a few times. He's a great guy. He does proper detailed analysis of any new features he has to put into that program because he doesn't want to take on technical debt because he knows in the long run, technical debt is what kills most projects.
Yes.
So he's been writing that program since he was in high school, which I think is about 15 years ago now. And it's still where, and it's 600,000 lines of code to calculate pi on a home system. But he keeps the technical debt relatively low, and he doesn't take anything on unless he's going to stay that way.
Uh, virtual Alicat says VirtualBox still has seamless mode. Is it much worse than VMware? It doesn't actually work. If you go and check the bug tracker, it's a broken, horrible mess. It can kind of work in some scenarios, but generally depends on Windows 7. And Cubes OS has a Windows 7 seamless driver that still works really well, but Windows 7 is not a thing anymore. So that's messed up. And Renver Singh corrects me and says that he was comparing it with the BSDs in Illumos, not Windows. FreeBSD, I like FreeBSD's no nonsense approach to things. Like Linux is more like committee, and it's like, okay, let's consider all the options, let's do it every way possible. And FreeBSD is more like, no, we got to get some work done here. Let's just do it this way, and that can make sense in some scenarios. I like it.
I want to change tack in this conversation, and speak about our Hygon project.
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
I mean, we should probably do sort of like a post mortem on that.
Yes.
So for anybody who hasn't seen either Wendell's videos or my content on it, or even Linus's videos on it, Wendell, through his wheeling and dealing, managed to get hold of some CPUs from that are called Hygon Dhyana CPUs. These are CPUs formed out of a joint venture between AMD and a consortium of Chinese companies. It's very complicated on how it works for legal reasons and where the IP is, but ultimately they created CPUs for the Chinese market, and just for the Chinese market, to the point where I saw one at Computex in 2018. I was allowed to take pictures of it. I posted an article of it, and that company never spoke to me again. And
And the
still
guy that
to this
spoke to you
day,
probably got fired.
yes.
Sorry, guy.
So,
If you're watching, biding your
so,
time till you can get revenge. I'm so sorry.
so we've been trying to get hold of these CPUs for ages to test. Just see, because these are fundamentally Zen 1, but by base design with additional changes that are requested by the Chinese partners, but approved and designed by AMD, sort of thing. So things that they changed were the cryptographic algorithms. So we all know AES and SHA, and those ones that are commonly used in the West. They got taken out, and then the Chinese ones got put in because the Chinese do a different elliptic cryptography. We also found some issues where random number generation, the RD-RAND and the RD-seed, are at very different speeds to the Zen 1 counterparts. I had issues enabling AVX and AVX2 on Windows,
Yes.
as
And I
in.
tried and couldn't get it to work in Windows either.
So what happens is the CPU reports that it is AVX and AVX2 capable, but for some reason Windows doesn't enable it.
Yeah.
Which is a weird prospect because I didn't realize that Windows could do that. I didn't realize Windows could disable instructions.
It's something in the kernel. I don't know.
It's it's funny. So I mean, I have ways that I can check to see what works and what doesn't, and I have a few people that I ping back and forth. And apparently, one of the Chinese companies reached out to somebody I know and said, "How do we get your program to work on it with AVX?" And he was like, "I didn't realize that was a thing either." So, but ultimately, these were, for lack of a better comparison, Zen 1 chips that performed slightly worse than Zen 1 did.
I think that some of that may also be down to microcode. Like the microcode may legitimately just be incomplete. So like in some kind of initialization routine is needed for AVX, and because the Linux kernel I can see was trying to load some AMD specific stuff because those processor IDs were added to the kernel a while ago. And it may be that the Linux microcode is older or better than what was physically on the board, because AVX and AVX2 did work in Linux, but it was still really, really sketchy just getting Linux to boot. And one of the reasons that Linux was super sketchy to boot is because the ACPI tables just weren't there. And so the kernel would be like, okay, let's use the ACPI tables. And that there was nothing about them that was valid. And so it's like, okay, are you really sure that I need to initialize the hardware at this address? And there's just nothing there. So you had to disable all that, and then it would boot.
I wonder if you could change the CPU string to authentic AMD and it would be fine.
Probably.
Because I remember years ago, VIA had that thing where if you there were code paths for VIA and code paths for Intel and code paths for default, and if you change from VIA to default, it would run faster. I think there was a lawsuit about it. I haven't gone into much detail, but yeah.
Well, that was the whole reason that those there's a register now that is basically a bit mask of all of the supported instruction sets, and that the whole reason that was created was to avoid quote unquote, the need to check the vendor string and then decide what to do.
But I mean, so these CPUs, people were like, "Oh, you shouldn't review anything out of China. China's the enemy." It's at the end of the day, um, that agreement between that joint venture, whole tangle of companies, was only for the base Zen 1 design to be modified. They don't have Zen 2. They don't have any improvements that were put into Zen Plus. And all those companies are now on the US entity list, so they can't even order chips from global foundries anymore.
They're on
Uh,
the naughty list.
so there are not going to be any more Hygon CPUs. Um, what's out there is out there. Who knows? Maybe come next year, when you know, depending on what happens with the U.S. political situation, um, there might be things might happen again. I mean, the whole U.S. entity list situation is now becoming more of a problem for Huawei because the U.S. is threatening to stop selling EUV machines to TSMC, which
Hmm.
actually would have a knock-on effect for everybody that uses TSMC.
Yeah.
It's so condensed version is uh, the US government does not want Huawei making latest generation chips, and because Huawei uses TSMC and they have access to TSMC EUV, um, the US government doesn't want Huawei to make those chips. And in order to stop them making the chips, they're saying to TSMC, we won't let you work with US companies unless you stop working with Huawei. So, strong arm. And the EUV machines are pretty much all built in Wilton, Connecticut by a company called ASML, who have a monopoly on EUV technology because they are the ones that can do it. I think they're making 30 EUV machines this year. Um, and the US government is trying to stop the ability for ASML to sell them to TSMC. So that's going to have a knock-on effect on not only Huawei, but AMD. That might even have a knock-on effect on Intel for their FPGAs,
Mhm.
because Intel makes a bunch of FPGAs at TSMC. Now, if any of them are moved on to an EUV process, then yeah, they're going to have problems. I think in the long run, blocking sales of those machines to TSMC is going to hurt the US. It's
Yeah.
actually going to hurt. It's going to hurt the whole world because it also reduces the amount of tax that ASML pays.
Yeah.
Somebody says I thought ASML was Dutch. So the big R&D center is in the Netherlands. They also have a factory there. They also have a factory in Wilton, Connecticut. Excuse me. And that the factory in Wilton, Connecticut, I have an open invitation to go visit. I'm trying to tie it in so if I ever visit New York, I can take 3 hour drive up there to do it. Unfortunately, in the 10 years I've been at Anantech, I've been to New York 3 times or twice. Once was to visit Global Foundries, where I got this fantastic Global Foundries mug. So yeah, I haven't been to New York enough because none of the events that I do on a regular basis happen in New York. But if I can, and I will do that, I'll get them to pull Wendell along, and maybe we can do a tour of an EUV manufacturing facility.
That'll be exciting. Oh, that'll be so much video. Oh, they probably would be unhappy with the resolution of the video,
Too much. So you're gonna have to take your 480p camera.
though. Yeah, it's like can't have the secrets leaking out. It's like a
Yeah,
VHS only. It's like okay, sounds good. Retro tech.
yeah. So to put a line under Hygon, yeah, Hygon is finished for now. Um,
Which is
there
sad,
is.
really, because I don't. I mean, it really was not a threat to the U.S. in any way in
Oh
terms
no.
of like economically or technologically. The one curious thing though is the Epic embedded CPU, like legit for whatever reason, and maybe it's because the microcode was incomplete. Because if you flash back, if you flash like if you go and download a just fabulously ancient BIOS for a motherboard, sometimes the performance is better, and it's because there's literally nothing in the microcode. It seems like, and that Hygon embedded EPIC could score better on Time Spy with a GPU, and it seemed to be because the round trip latency from CPU to GPU was less on that for whatever reason.
Right. So I think I know the answer to that. So the standard Zeppelin die has 32 lanes PCIe because
Mm-hmm.
of Naples first gen Epic Naples
Mm-hmm.
had 32 lanes per Zeppelin die. Um, so that means you have two PCIe root complexes of 16 and 16. Um, and you saw in that board that both of the PCI slots were 16 and 16,
Mm-hmm.
whereas on a normal AM4 it's just 116. I think that in the enumeration order, the standard Ryzen desktop chips used the second root complex, but
Ah,
but so they used the first root complex for the PCIe 3x4, and also for the chipset connection because you want the lowest latency on that chipset connection, right?
no, that makes sense.
Which means that they would have used the second enumerated PCIe root complex for the PCIe slot in normal Ryzen. Now with the Hygon embedded, because you didn't have that, and you could use both the root complexes, that's why I think you saw the better performance.
That would make sense too, because if that was a binning thing, like otherwise that die could have gone to Epic if all of its primary X16 lanes were fine. Um,
To be
because,
honest, I think all the PCIe lanes on all the Zeppelin dies are perfectly fine.
okay, well,
It's that's that that that. I mean, yes, there's a chance that some of them would have been hampered by defects, but I think the defect rate was small enough, and the PCIe section on the die is actually small enough that it wouldn't be that much of an issue.
they might have
Um,
also repurposed some of the because there's not enough pins in AM4. I wouldn't think, but it's possible that they repurposed some of the pins for power in the non-soldered version of the CPU. Maybe
maybe, um, but yeah.
I don't know
So
if you could deliver 150 watts through and 32 PCIe lanes and DDR4 dual channel in the number of pins in AM4.
hmm,
Be kind
I
of
don't know.
close.
I don't know. We do see some of these new hybrid CPUs coming through with less pins. Coming,
Well, don't the new 4000 Ryzen CPUs follow the same pinout as the 3000 series, which is only 8 PCIe 3 lanes externally?
Yeah, the reason why Renoir Ryzen Mobile 4000 only has 8 PCIe lanes like that is because of power.
Hmm.
PCIe 4 takes a lot of power, and in a 15-watt chip, you don't want to be consuming 7 watts on the PCIe.
Well, that makes sense.
Um, so, uh, though going back to these Chinese x86 CPUs, perhaps we should have a Western exclusive, and I can show
Ooh.
everybody this, which
It's
is yeah.
another x86 clone. Except this one is all this one. So where does the intellectual property for this one come from?
So everybody knows about AMD and Intel being the two major x86 vendors. There is actually a third, and that's called VIA. So VIA kind of piggybacks off of AMD's license, kind of. It's a long story that goes back 20, 30 years. But VIA Technologies, or technically Centaur, I would say
Centaur
Centaur,
Halls.
but I would say Centaur just because I'm English. But Centaur Technologies, um, they are they are the group inside VIA that uses the x86 license. Um, so they have a joint venture with I think it's with a research institution in China, and together they create Shaoxin. That's Zhaoxin, Shaoxin CPUs. Now, funny enough, um, Steve from Gaben's Nexus actually did a review of a Shaoxin CPU. He did one that's actually 2 generations behind this one that I just showed. So he did a ZXC. This is technically ZXE, which was renamed ZX6000. And so what I've shown here is a Shaoxin Kaixian Lu Juijian CPU. My Chinese is terrible.
It's better than
Um,
mine, which is non-existent.
so this is the latest generation VIA CPU. This is an 8-core CPU. Um, I think the one that Steve had, the ZX. So I'm just going to say ZXC and ZXE because that's easier. ZXC that Steve had, I think, was a quad core. That came out in 2011, I want to say.
Hmm.
So this one is actually new as of last year.
Hmm.
It's 16 nanometer, 8 cores, and so we did a news article on because some Chinese YouTubers had gotten hold of it and did like promo videos where they said next to nothing about it. So we did a news article based on that. And literally at the bottom, I said if anybody from Shaoxin wants to get in contact for like a Western teardown review, get in touch. Um, and a couple of weeks later, they did. I said, "Oh, hey, do you want to? This is an Antec. Um, this is what we do. This is the technical stuff." And they just replied saying, "Yeah, we know who you are." Um, there'll be one ready in. Or we'll send you a near final one in a couple of weeks. We'll let you know. And then yeah, end of March, it's arrived. I've done some tests on it. I'm gonna have to wait a couple of weeks before I can write it up, just because I've got other deadlines. It's an interesting chip. It's designed in the same way that those Hygon CPUs are, but it's more for the commercial, government, school kind of market. It's like a normal CPU with AVX. It performs kind of like an FX 8350, but it's a much lower TDP. And I mean, this is a 16 nanometer chip. Those FX 8350s were what, 28 nanometer
Yeah.
global foundries. So this is 16 nanometer TSMC. It's about 150 square millimeters, which is about the same size as Ryzen and the same size as Tiger Lake. It's only got 3 phases. There's no overclocking. Take standard DDR4 memory, standard PCIe. It's even got USB Type C.
Hmm.
No AM3 board has that really. The only weird thing is it's got the 24-pin power pin here,
Yeah.
which is weird. It's SATA ports and whatever. PCI, just for those systems that require PCI.
I can finally run my Sound Blaster Audigy on something.
So funny enough, what you need is one of these. If I can get it, this
GT430.
GT430, but this is the highest spec PCI card you can get, and I asked Zotac for one. So I think technically they did like a GT 520 and a GT 610, but it's the same chip.
Mm.
And that actually works. I actually got out the other day to test a single core VIA chip.
Nice.
So, yeah, I've done the testing on that. It basically runs 2 quad core segments, and the latency between them is very consistent. I need to get a proper topology list down, and like I say, performance is kind of FXE 350-ish. I'll go into details on that when it's done. I've gone through some of the instruction sets, and it looks like so even though it is only AVX, it looks like they've hand-tuned some of the SSE instructions. So they're a bit faster than what Steve tested.
Hmm.
It's not going to set the world on light, but it's something that nobody else has tested.
Yeah. Well,
so
x86, inexpensive x86 is always good. I've been with the cabin fever. I've been doing some let's call it chores around the house. Maybe gonna do a video series. My house runs Linux, so it might be a good system to just build inside the wall that's gonna be there for 30 years managing the house.
Yeah. Yeah. So funny enough, right? This, I'll bring it again. It has a video output, display port,
Nice.
HDMI, even has D-sub.
Yeah.
So this actually has integrated graphics. Do you want to know who does the integrated graphics on that?
Is it not VIA?
Well, it's VIA. It's S3.
Yeah. So
I have never installed S3 drivers in my life until I got that board. I installed them, and it said not compatible.
Wow.
as in the latest drivers from VIA that I could source are too old for this. So
I've got a 2 meg S3 card somewhere in the basement.
it's I've got an S3 card that's actually zip tied to the wall over here. So my boss Ryan Smith, who's done GPUs at Anantec for a long time, saw it and said, "I need that. Can you give it to me at CES 2021?" And I said, "Do you really think we'll be out of isolation by CES 2021?"
I just hope Computex is not canceled. It's already been moved. It's like I really enjoy that trip because I don't get to go on a lot of trips because I go on a lot of trips for work, which have all been canceled.
Well, so Computex in 2003 was delayed because of SARS, right? So it was moved to the same time. It was moved to like the 28th to the 30th of September. Now, back then, the amount of people who attended Computex dropped by what, 75%, 80%?
Yeah,
Um,
it
and
was a
that,
lot.
and that, and Anne from Anantec was flown out there by the people who organized Computex to say, "Hey, look, it's still perfectly fine to come visit." And he was fine. It was fine. I mean, the threat is that the new Computex just won't have anything that's interesting because it may be mid-cycle.
Mm,
I don't know. We'll see. I hope that if everything gets sorted by then, that companies will have kind of their own events in Taipei,
yeah.
around the same time, because then, at the minute, Computex is only scheduled for 3 days, and normally it's like 5 or 6. So,
For the Q&A, if the reason for having few x86 vendors is the mandatory license from Intel, does that apply to hardware-assisted emulation on non-x86? Well, that was it starts with an L.
uh, no, so Qualcomm does x86 translation
Oh
on
yeah, on ARM.
Snapdragon, on Windows on Snapdragon. Now, Intel threatened to sue them, but then ultimately pulled out. Um, a news article about a chip called Tachyon, which is a company that's the person behind who essentially created SandForce controllers and kickstarted the SSD market.
Mm-hmm.
That's this is his new company and his new chip. That's a custom instruction set architecture, but that is also set to emulate x86. But it has he said last year at Hot Chips or 2 years ago at Hot Chips that would have a 40% overhead. But he wants to run it at 4 gigahertz. So he's saying that a 4 gigahertz Tachyon would run the equivalent of a 2.5 gigahertz Xeon. He's
Hmm.
that confident in the performance of his chip. And then people are saying, will that have any issues with Intel going after this emulation? And chances are probably not if they didn't go after Qualcomm, and that Qualcomm chip is more widely spread. And so yeah, don't forget some of the x86
Patents.
patents expire later this year. I mean, it only goes up to as far as AVX, I think,
Yeah.
or like SSSE3 or something like that. So,
Uh, there are some patents that it was Transmeta. That was the company I was trying to think
mm,
of. So Transmeta was doing some like very 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 long instruction word translation of x86, and they were able to secure some patents on that as well. I'm not sure who ended up with those patents though.
um, I don't want to say anybody because that could be potentially libelous.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I can't I can't remember, but Transmeta has got a valuable patent portfolio or what whoever owns it now for that real-time translation. Qualcomm may have ended up with them, at least some of them with their thing, and that may have been what shut Intel down. It's like, "Okay, you want to come after us? Here's what we got." And it's like, "Oh, never mind."
Yeah.
I don't
So,
know.
well, I mean, it's people have said, well, with the patents expiring, does that mean that there will be more x86 type CPUs? And the potential answer is yes. The likely answer is China.
See, the problem with x86 is it's just such garbage.
It's inefficient, but widely used and backwards compatible.
Yeah, but it's just such garbage. I mean, if you think about all the stuff that needs to be insanely fast on a modern computer, And literally nothing in the modern computer is built to make those things insanely fast. Like USB is kind of a dumpster fire for reacting quickly to human input, and the graphics subsystem and the compositing subsystem is kind of a dumpster fire for being able to render graphics really quickly with very, very, very low latency from user input. And then the operating system is just not designed with the user in mind at all, because it's just not.
It's what's that new company? Nuvia,
Yeah,
Nuvia,
Nubia.
Nuvia. So not related to Via or anything. Um, they're promising some big uh ARM for the server space. And on Anantech, we've already reviewed Graviton 2, the new Amazon chip, and that's got a very competitive outlook compared to x86 if you're prepared to recompile your code.
Yeah.
So and Nuvia is threatening to do something really high performance on ARM, though I suspect they're more sort of 2 years out at least.
It's easy to think about. I was thinking about I've got the 1 gig set up for like the test lab and things like that, and I was thinking about how much abstraction is needed to really be able to move from like 1 gig to 10 gig, and then from like 10 gig to 40 gig, or and 40 gig's not really a thing anymore architecturally. It's architecturally kind of a dead end. So it's 10 to 25 gig, and then 25 gig to 100 gig, which is really 4 channels of 25 gig, and then 400 gig, which is more channel like 4 channels of 100 gig, kind of, but not really. And from like a mux standpoint, and you start to realize that like x86 and just like standard processors just can't shuffle information in and out quickly enough in order to be able to service that much data. There's no getting around that you need custom silicon to move things around a packet or two at a time. And it seems like we're getting, like with 5 gigahertz CPUs, we're getting there. We're going to have to start moving around applications, a thing at a time. And I think that's one of the places where ARM is going to be able to take over the universe, is they're going to start working with things a packet at a time or a jumbo frame at a time. And the application is going to work in that in that regard, so that you're not even keeping the memory controller busy, because all the low-hanging fruit there is gone in that architecture.
Well, so regarding speeds, the next platform actually had a good interview with Radoslav Danilak of Tachyon, because he talks about what, even though frequency is getting higher, wires are getting slower.
Yeah.
And I just want to quote here. So I'll just literally quote verbatim. Core counts are growing, but we're also decelerating the clock speed because of thermal issues. All of the transistors are faster, but the problem is that the wires become thinner and thinner and more resistive, and wire delays are therefore increasing. There used to be a 100 picosecond per millimeter delay in chips, and now it is more like 1,000 picosecond per millimeter delay. So that's just propagation of signals through wires.
Yeah.
And because they're getting thinner and thinner, resistance gets higher and higher because there's just not enough cross-sectional area for electrons to go through. And as resistance increases, it's they're just slower in moving down the wire.
We don't have a
But
quantum mechanical hack like we have with fiber optic cables, where it's like the incident angle is so small that, and it's a hack. Like, we're exploiting the laws of the universe in fiber optic cables, and no one realizes it, and we don't have that in silicon.
well, so this is what silicon photonics is more kind of external to the chip right now. But if we can do photonic computing, all of that goes away.
Yeah. Well, I
The
just
problem
want.
is photonic computing is hard because you have to make lenses on the nanoscale.
I mean, fiber optics is not perfectly conserved, but if you were to convince me that there is a perpetual motion machine somewhere in the universe, fiber optic cables is close enough to a perpetual motion machine to actually, like, it's okay. It's so close. It's so close.
Yeah.
Not quite, but it's close.
Somebody says that John Masters from Nuvia might be worth inviting over. John Masters is a fun guy.
He is. I think I talked to him on Twitter once, and it was a delightful experience. And it's so incredibly intelligent and also friendly. But he also
Um,
shuts down like shenanigans really quickly. Just like nope.
it's funny because obviously he's part of Nuvia, and Nuvia are making a chip that's competitive to Intel. Nuvia's offices are right close to Intel, so before this whole lockdown and no flying, whenever he was at the office, he'd go for a morning run by the Intel headquarters in Santa Clara and do a video of him himself making a joke in front of the Intel um, headquarters. So that's always funny. He's funny like that.
Well, you can't let them ever live down NetBurst. I mean, come on.
Or or, or Itanium, or sorry, Itanic.
The Titanic, yeah.
Titanic.
It's like, listen, maybe if we just shove a little harder, we can bring this thing to market and people will accept it. It's like, no, no one wants this.
The best thing about Itanium for me was looking at the projections of revenue from when they first thought of the chip, and they'll be like, it'll be $5 billion of revenue within 2 years, and then you realize it wasn't even a few $100 million through the whole lifetime of the product. And
Yeah.
every year, the predictions of how much revenue per year would go down and down, down. And there's a great graph showing it. So,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Daniel Silva, 9.99, and it's just heart. Okay, thanks. What
is
is the
this what we have to do with that now?
It says, what is the resistive delay? The propagation of electromagnetic signals should be limited by the speed of light in the material, which is only a function of resistivity, not resistance. Ah, no. See, it's signal to noise ratio. So they cheat. The actual mechanics of it is that you have to basically put a repeater in the silicon so the electron ends up being absorbed by a gate and then re-emitted, and that introduces the end-to-end delay. And so it's a tiny little nanostructure that's dealing with this, because otherwise the electron would be lost in the noise of the substrate. It's like leaking electrons into the substrate is a non-trivial amount of shenanigans that are going on. And actually, sometimes with overclocking, like you can actually end up with a better overclocking situation when you have a leaky substrate versus a substrate that is more efficient and less leaky because of the physical properties of silicon. It's really sort of bizarre.
Better overclocking, but a lot worse electromigration.
Yes. Where you
With that,
physically electromigration is where like the physical, like these are physical structures in silicon. They will move over time. Like that thing that's flapping back and forth, it's not mechanically flapping back and forth, but that electron has so much momentum it will physically carry silicon atoms with it sometimes.
and that's what kills CPUs. I mean, there's always discussion about how long does a CPU last. I got a message the other day from somebody who said, I've been using Core i5s for 10 years. I'm looking to upgrade, but I've had bad experiences with AMD in the past. Do AMD chips, will they last 10 years? And I said, well, standard warranty is what, 3 years on most of these chips, depending on
Yeah.
where you live. But
Yeah.
but these chips are meant to last decades, and they last better if you don't go for the highest clocked chip, and they last longer if you don't overclock them,
Yeah.
just because of electron migration. But if you pick something that's Ryzen 5 or even Ryzen 3, if that suits you, because they have the potential to be good silicon but are downclocked and downrated because of supply and demand and how well the process does, that thing will last for ages.
Yeah. Yeah. You can also, there are certain processes inside the chip that are designed with electron migration in mind.
Hmm.
So,
Redundancy and stuff.
yeah, redundancy and things like the chip knows that the VRM is not going to be able to respond quickly enough, and so it'll just shunt the energy into a thing that it doesn't matter if there's electron migration.
Yeah.
It's really insane, and like a lot of that is like secret sauce that is like super guarded. It's like, what do you do to deal with this situation? Because it's like it takes the equivalent of 7 years for the the VRM to turn off the blast furnace of voltage when you're not actually doing anything.
Well, it's like with SSDs where you have the cells and they all have to respond to voltage levels, and over time the voltage transitions between different bit levels change because of the structure of the silicon changes, and the algorithms are designed to detect that and adjust for it, and that's how you get a longer life.
Yeah.
Somebody's saying ATI Fire GL. Let me pick out this. I literally have a card that says right in front of me. Not sure if you can read that.
Oh yeah,
Fire
nice.
Fire GL V5100, which is probably a lot newer than what people are saying. But hey, ATI cards. I just happen to have one just above me on my desk. You know, right next to the 2080 Ti.
My i7 920 since January 2010, still rocking right now with a Sapphire Pulse. There was a I think it was a 930. It's the 6 core, 930, 940. It's something from that 1366 genre. It just died, and it was overclocked like insane and running 24/7 since around launch day, and it literally just died. So I guess that's about 10 years with a fairly serious overclock. So that's pretty good in terms of electromigration and everything else. So it was running like 3.6 or 3.8 gigahertz. It was close to 4 gigahertz.
I've only killed one chip due to electromigration, and that was my 2600K that I purchased during launch week. And that's because I was able to run it single core 5.3 gigahertz, which meant it was like in the top half of 1%.
Yeah, that's insane.
Now, the thing is, I was using that for my competitive overclocking. And I remember I think it was, so the day after Christmas Day in the UK is called Boxing Day, because I know the US doesn't have that. But I remember Boxing Day going to a pub in Buxton, which is an area in the UK that's famous for its spring mineral water. And we were in a pub there where I had it on a water cooling with three 360 mil rads, massive thick piping, D5 pump, super fast delta fans. We had the door open because it was -5 degrees outside. I had 3 layers, and I was just pumping this thing at 5.3, 5.35 gigahertz for the whole 2-3 days, getting records with my HD 4850s, pulling out old hardware. I have 2 boxes up here of 3870 X2s. I have 4870 X2s. I have 4 of those. Well, I had 4 of those. I now have 3 of those because I swapped one only a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, all that stuff. So that chip, that 2600K that did 5.3, 5.35 gigahertz single core was great. Though I knew the problem was the electromigration was happening because the next time I went to use it, it took a little bit more voltage to get that frequency, then a little more voltage, and this obviously exacerbates the problem even more. Then it just wouldn't do it. So then I tried 5.2, and it did that for a bit, and then it couldn't do it, and then 5.1. Now, for that chip, I need to increase the voltage just to get it to boot at stock.
Yeah, those electrons those transistors can only flip so many trillions upon trillions of times, and then they're just done.
I have a 3770K that I accidentally put too much voltage through the memory controller. So now I can't run any memory at XMP on that chip anymore. That was my fault, because I thought I had a 4770K in that motherboard at the time. That was my fault. I thought I had a different chip. Mind you, because I mentioned I built my VR system recently. I just took a system off my shelf, put in a GPU, and put it into my living room to set up my VR. I installed the OS. I did everything. I started playing, and then I wondered why the RTX 2080 Ti, it was being choppy, and then I realized I had left a dual-core Celeron in there. Turns out dual-core Celerons are not good for VR. This was a KB lane. So I went, okay, let's change it for a quad-core or something.
Mark Rose asks, he says, I've got several chips that start producing errors after a couple of years of 24/7 M prime without overclocking. Is that likely electron migration? Not necessarily. It could be RAM, it could be motherboard, it could be anything. If you up the voltage a little bit, a tiny little bit on the CPU, and the problems go away, it is likely the CPU, but it could still be the motherboard.
Yeah, but it also M prime, that would be heavy AVX instructions as well.
Yeah.
So you're pushing the power limits, so it's forcing it to go to a higher voltage mode probably. So
We need a quantum mechanical hack on silicon the same way that we have it with fiber optic cable. Like, that's what we need. The electrons need to get from point A to point B in some sort of substrate that's just a magic quantum mechanical hack. That's what we need. And then all these problems go away.
yeah.
Or we can make our CPUs out of superconductors. I mean, I could deal with that.
The problem with superconductors, or it's part of my degree and stuff, was about superconductors. It's high temperature superconductors. The was it the IBCO type stuff, the indium
Oh yeah,
boron
yeah,
carbon oxygen stuff.
yeah.
They only top out at negative 70 degrees Celsius, so they're still. It's the amount of it's like the battery industry, right? There's been next to little movement over the last 10 to 15 years. It's
Yeah.
tough. And until somebody produces a paradigm shifting thing, it's almost as if not everything is possible. That's the problem.
Yeah. Do you think the Kraken 63X is a good fit for Threadripper 3960 when overclocking? Probably not when overclocking because the heat spreader doesn't cover the entire top of the chip. So it's probably fine at stock. Probably not great unless you're just talking about mild overclocking. Brendan Stubbs asked if we've ever played Half-Life Alyx.
I haven't.
I haven't either.
I've literally only just purchased Beat Saber, so
Beat Saber is a lot of fun.
my arms are hurting after 2 days of Beat Saber because we're stuck inside. We have to do some exercise, I guess.
Yeah. I could probably order it on Amazon, but it would be, it's like, oh, that's not essential. That's going to be here in a month and a half. It's like, okay. Probably
It's
still be inside.
Half-Life Alyx will be cheap come Christmas. Next Christmas, I'll buy it then.
It's free if you don't already have a VR headset and you buy the one from Valve, which apparently is magical because it knows where your fingers are.
Well, doesn't the Oculus kind of do that with the thumb and the finger? It does. I mean,
Yeah, I guess you can a little bit.
the only reason I have the Oculus is because it was on super discount.
Hmm.
So then that was, yeah. No, it's funny. I purchased it in my old house probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it's only because I've now set it up and now my front room is free of all my tech stuff. So, oh,
Let's see what else is on the agenda.
do you want to talk?
Uh huh.
Do you want to talk mobile CPUs? Because we just
Yeah,
had
yeah.
pictures of. So Anantech's Ryzen Mobile 4000 review isn't ready yet. Because we were told a different embargo date to everybody else. As in, well, it was changed, but for some reason we weren't told of the change. So it's still down in my schedule as like 2 weeks from now. So I've had when I saw everybody else post, I went, huh? Did the embargo change? Check my emails. No. Email AMD. Oh yeah, it did. Oh,
Oh.
okay. So the idea is for me to get my review out on Monday. That's what I'm pushing for. I'm currently literally testing it over there. You can't see it. It's just finished a battery test, which I think didn't do what I wanted. I'm testing it against the Razer 9th Gen Razer Blade. So same GPU, slightly different screens and what have you. Both got 16 gigs of memory. It's going to be fun. The battery life when watching video on the Asus Zephyrus G14 with Ryzen 4000 Mobile, I got over 12 hours. I got just under 7 on the Razer Blade, which is great. Although my web test seems to be doing something weird, I need to verify that. Thing is, if the embargo was what I thought it was, I'd have plenty of time to sort these out. But I'm having to do everything in very quick succession.
It's really, really bizarre. There was so everything is locked down here, but right before the lockdown, which was 2 days actually before anything was published, Best Buy was selling the Asus laptop. Like you could just walk in and buy it. So, and I was like, oh, I should buy that. And then it's like, I probably shouldn't just be spending arbitrary amounts of money right now because the thing. And so it's like,
Yeah.
They didn't have any display models out, but it was like, hey, do you have a display model? And then the next day it was like, everything is closed, no one go home. So I could order one
Yep.
online. Like I could have, and then they'll bring it out to your car. But it was like, oh no, no, I can't do that.
Well, I mean, initial opinions of Ryzen Mobile 4000 is it's very performant. The video battery life is good. I need to figure out more sort of like work style battery. Um, the funny thing is with the Asus is that the space bar is actually thicker on the left hand side than it is on the right hand side. And that's because if you have your fingers on WASD, your thumb naturally rests on the space bar. The normal space bar isn't thick enough to hold your whole thumb. So they've
Hmm.
made it bigger for your whole thumb, which I thought is like a nice little touch.
Yeah, that's
Um,
pretty cool.
so it's I'm when once I've done testing it for review, I obviously I want to do like a 1 month, 2 month use case. It's a shame that we're homebound because I can't well, I can take it to different. If I did a world tour with my with the laptop, it would literally be in different rooms of my house. That
Yeah.
is my world right now. So we'll yeah, it'd be interesting for it to have it as a day drive. I mean, currently I'm using the Huawei MateBook X Pro, which is lighter, um, but it's Intel, it's eighth gen i7. So to go to that, we'll see how it's different. Um,
I've got an 8th gen Intel laptop now, and it's the one that has the Vega graphics, and I love it except for the battery life. The battery life is garbage. And it's a 95 watt hour battery, but I just the
is
best
that the Dell?
combination of drivers. Yeah, it's the Dell XPS, and
Yeah.
it's the battery life is like 4 hours and change for my usage pattern.
So they just changed the drivers a little while ago. So now you can download the latest from AMD and they will work.
Will it be more than 4 hours battery life? Possibly.
If you turn it off, yes.
No.
I have no idea.
Oh no. Paulinus asks, guys, did you hear about any proper workstation class TRX 40 boards? With integrated 10 gig and 6/7 PCIe slots. I have not heard of such a thing yet, but
Isn't
um,
the Gigabyte Extreme?
the Gigabyte Extreme has built-in Intel X550, and I reviewed it, and it's great. But it's only 4 PCIe slots, 2x16,
Right.
2x8. But you can, Sliger in the US has a bifurcation cable that will take an X16 slot and give you 2 x8 slots. And that works great with a case like the Fractal Define 7XL because you can use all 4 slots and then the 2 slots vertically. So you can do that and kind of cheat and get an extra slot if you need like 5 slots.
It's the we have done a couple of boards on the Intel workstation side, the Xeon W boards. There's a few of those that have good 7 slots.
The
Gav,
Sage, the Sage X299 comes to mind because it's got a ton of slots, but the PCIe layout, like the matrix of which lanes go where, is really dumb.
yeah, it's the what was I going to say? Uh, so with the STRX, because you actually only have 56 PCIe lanes, not 64, because because 8 of them are used for the chipset.
Yep.
So you have to have 16, 16, 16, 8. But then I guess you could go 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8.
Yeah.
It's there are so few STRX 40 boards, um, because that's what they expected the volume to be. And these chips, even though they're Halo, and even though 3990X will sell quite considerably for the people that need it, in terms of volume wise, it's still less than the mainstream.
Yeah.
Um, so, question from Leafy is back. Does TR3000 have enough memory address pins to support the rumored TRX80 motherboards? TRX80 motherboards aren't a thing. That was fake news. We got that confirmed at CES. We literally spoke to a bunch of people who know all the roadmaps people who I trust, and I got it confirmed by multiple sources that TRX 80 has never been on the roadmap.
There are now a couple of Epic motherboards though. If you really need a ton of PCIe slots, you can get an Epic ATX big boy ATX motherboard, and it's
Yep.
8 channels, and it's a ton of PCIe slots. And you know the even it's not. I mean, it's 3.35 gigahertz at the upper end, but you know that the clock speed is a little bit malleable. At 3.35 gigahertz is not as slow as you think it is, because the speed difference from 3.35 gigahertz to 4.2 gigahertz is I think it's a little. I think the 4.2 gigahertz, 4.3 gigahertz. I don't want to call it misleading. It's not really misleading, but the CPU is not, like, it just takes as long as it takes regardless of the clock speed. So 3.35 gigahertz is not that much slower than 4.3 gigahertz, even though it's, you know, one of those numbers is like 20% less than the other number. It's not really.
Um, to Paul Linus's proper workstation class STRX 40 board, yeah, if you want to go Epic, then ASRock do a single socket Epic D8, which does have by 16 by 8 by 16 by 8 by 16 by 8 by 16. So that has enough slots, and it comes with dual 10 gig. I think my motherboard reviewer Gavin he's in the middle of finishing that review. I think he should be finishing it because he sent it back to me the other day. So that should be on an Antec probably next week, middle of next week. So that's an option. The problem with some of these Epic boards is that I've noticed that there's often two revisions, revision 1 and revision 2.
Yeah.
And revision 1 doesn't have a big enough BIOS to support the Rome CPUs. You have to get the revision 2 because it has the 32 meg BIOS.
Sometimes there are hardware tweaks as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you order the board from a retailer, there's no guarantee what revision you're going to get.
Yeah.
So I had this problem because I needed a dual socket Epic board, and Supermicro does like the H11 DSi, and it is literally, there's a version with that's Naples only, and there's a version that's Naples and Rome. So
yeah, get the Rome version if you can.
yeah, I did. It's up there and working with dual 48 cores. So
nice. Jamerican asks, what is your thoughts on the FX Pro FX Pro 1? Tried Selfish or Lineage? I haven't tried Lineage yet.
Sorry, I'm just still laughing at FX.
That's what I've been calling it because I have to. So
yeah.
But I have not tried Lineage or Selfish yet, but it's on my to-do list. Do you recommend it for a former HTC Touch Pro 2 user? Yeah, I think if you really like the Touch Pro and you're looking for a replacement, it's fine. But it's not like I'm not gonna swoon over it. I want to try the Gemini or something like that. I really think they could have done a better job with the keyboard. But I've gotten used to typing on it, and I've gotten pretty fast with it, and I've gotten pretty fast with it not looking at the keyboard. So, meh.
Right. So I used the BlackBerry Key 2 LE for about 6 months last year. So that's one that has a physical keyboard as well, and the screen is only like 4 inches, so you get great battery life as well. Now I found that with the keyboard, because it's like a tactile feedback, my peak, because it's actually keys that you depress, my peak typing speed was slightly lower than on screen, but I made fewer errors, so it kind of averaged out. It took about a week to get used to it. With the BlackBerry Key 2 LE, there's a shift and other sorts of issues. But what I liked about it is that I could press like the equivalent of like a Windows key and T, and Twitter would appear, and it wouldn't matter what program I was in, I would instantly go to that. I like the Key 2 LE. It was a bit small. The FX Pro 1 would be kind of like a spiritual successor to that. The only thing is you have to pop out the keyboard, right?
So there's this window manager called the TUI, and so like you bind that to a key press, and it's really great because if you've got a long sequence of things that you need to do, you can just go into autopilot where you hit the thing and you start typing. But like you can just type the word calculator, or you can type the like this, that, or the other, And I found that is actually faster than navigating the Android UI bullshit. Like when I know exactly what I need to do, I can just, and I only have to hit 2 or 3 letters. Like I don't have to type out calculator all the way. I can just like see whatever and then hit the thing and I'm good to go.
I mean, it's really useful for if you have to keep switching between apps. Yeah. The one issue I had with the BlackBerry is that if you moved into a new app, that would normally have the caret to start typing in a text box. It wouldn't be there. You would have to press on the screen to get the caret into the box. That was the only issue I had. A Giller says, "Am I crazy? It wasn't Ian, the editor in chief at Anantech for a while." No, I was never the editor in chief. It was Anand until 2014, and then it's Ryan Smith. I was never editor in chief. I've been senior editor since 2011. Initially on motherboards for a few years, and then I moved to CPUs as Anantech moved out. And then I also manage most of the rest of our staff as well. But I share management with Ryan. If Ryan's online, because we're in different time zones. If Ryan's awake, he does it with them, and when I'm awake, I do it with them. So, but Ryan is the one that actually has the definitive, what he says goes.
Gavin says that I heard the motherboard editor is a handsome guy. Yeah, I've met the motherboard editor before. He's a cool guy.
Oh, best laptop for Linux.
I don't know. System 76 makes some nice ones.
Yeah, I get their emails. I haven't ever used a system though.
It's I mean they're no nonsense. They're not anything super complicated. They're they're doing a lot of work with like core boot and that kind of thing. So that's nice. So like you can get away from the proprietary firmware. So that'll be nice. And I think that especially as AMD sort of takes over the universe, they will be more amenable to somebody developing a third-party firmware, and they won't just kneecap that. But they're never going to open source their firmware. They can't because of licensing agreements, from what I understand. I may be wrong about that. I may be surprised by that, but I think that they will be able. Once there are enough people interested, I think progress will be made with an open firmware for AMD to replace the PSP much faster than Core Boot is going to replace the Intel management engine. Prediction.
It's it's isn't the thing with AMD and Linux is the graphics drivers still need a bit of work. I mean, they're doing lots of work to it.
Things have gotten a lot better. So we're basically at AMD GPU is basically at parity with the proprietary driver. The only thing that is lagging is like when the 5700 and the 5600 and 5500 launched, the AMD GPU lagged a little bit more behind. But AMD, to its credit, did actually release functional, if not the prettiest, patches for the kernel, so you could roll your own, but it was not a fun experience. But they seem to be hiring a lot of talent in the industry and in the community, or from the community, to support their products more properly. But it's also a question of talent. Like you can't just hire randos to fill that. You need to, and there's not that job market is fierce. So it's not super easy to hire. It's like we need to be somebody to be the czar of our open source driver that's going to make sure that all of our wacky patches are going to be blessed. It's like that's a challenge.
Jedi Masters on asks if I have any Quadro GPUs. I do. They're really old. They're at least a decade old. We have contemplated reviewing Quadro GPUs on Anantech. The thing is, we don't think we have enough knowledge to do the Anantech kind of level justice. I mean, I could write some code that would emulate, some scientific processes, for double precision and stuff like that. But in terms of what the people who buy them would be interested in, we don't think we have enough of a benchmark base in order to provide any additional information for the people that would be interested. I know some people review them and they just do literal basic overview spec, and then some industry standard benchmarks, or they use spec workstation or something like that.
Yeah.
For us, that's not enough for a review. Um, but yeah, no, I'd like to get some in to do testing as and when I have a right a good code base to test.
I got two
Um,
Tesla V100s, and it's like, good lord, these are fast. And now I'm doing real time video analysis with them, and it's like, I don't even really know how to translate this into a video that would make sense because it's 32 gigs of HBM2. I don't like, how do I show you this in a way that makes sense? Like, yeah, cats per second. We were doing the TensorFlow thing, but there's
yep.
literally a competition now every year to see who can come up with the algorithm that learns the Cyfar 10 test data set the fastest. So improvements in the algorithm are outstripping the speed of the hardware. So it's just like, oh my gosh.
That's I mean that's the problem with doing an AI an article or a video on AI stuff. By the time you've done the benchmarks and you posted it, the algorithm's out of date.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, Somebody asked how does an Antec stay. CC asks how does an Antec stay in business. I should do my best Zuckerberg impression. We sell ads. Um, Anantech is part of a large publishing group called Future PLC. We're on the FTSE Stock Exchange 250. We're technically the biggest tech publisher in the US. We have brands that include Tom's Guide, Tom's Hardware, um, Space, Life Science, Laptop Mag, Top 10 Reviews. And there is a ad sales team that deals with that. The wider publisher also does events, events that 50,000 people attend, and that gets put on. Um, it's yeah, every site has to try and remain profitable in itself, but ultimately everything kind of goes into a pool and then gets split back out. So um, yeah, we haven't done sponsored. We don't do sponsored content. Gavin points out TechRadar. Yeah, sorry, TechRadar is the big site. That's mainly UK focused. There is a TechRadar US. Um, but yeah, it's some websites will do sponsored content. We don't go down that route so much. And yeah, the dynamics of YouTube doing sponsored content where a company will come along and give you money just to have a 10-second ad at the beginning of your video or whatever. If we did that in written workloads, people would just click the X and not bother. It's a
Yeah.
People are a lot willing to take sponsored content advertising on video than they are on written,
Yeah.
which there has
It's
been talk of a
disheartening.
why don't we do more video? And truth of the matter is, I can't edit video because I am useless at it. And I don't know how to go about finding somebody who will edit video, and I don't have the budget to do it, and I know we don't have the budget to do it because of we prefer having stuff on video, and there's a
It's
whole
hard.
thing.
It's really hard.
It's I know I have teased about starting my own YouTube channel, um, but that would literally be kind of like single takes to camera. Um, and that would be pretty bad as well. Maybe maybe people would like that. CC says, I remember the entire website turned red and had AMD branding. Yes, that was an ad deal. So that was like I believe that was like a 1 year ad deal, and so what they had is on an Antec you'll have like the most recently related topics, and if it's a CPU heavy week, then there'd be CPUs, then AMD, Intel, GPUs, smartphones, and then if it was a smartphone thing, it'd be smartphones, HTC, Apple, whatever. Um, what AMD paid for is a link there that said AMD Center, and that was in red. And if you clicked that, it would take you to a page that was just all of our AMD content. But AMD had no say in any of the reviews that we did, in any of the content that we did. They didn't have any input in that. That was a complete ad sales program, and we have I suspect our team is happy to do that. We keep a very solid religious separation between, it's the church and state separation between
Yep.
editorial and advertising. Um, we are very much separate. The only person I speak to in ads um, actually isn't there anymore. So I don't speak to anybody in ads. So the only time I know that we're running an ad campaign is when somebody else, at the same time as everybody else. Now, obviously, if something breaks, we have to go up the chain and say, "Hey, can you fix that?" So it's yeah, I don't get involved in that because they keep it away from editorial as much as possible, which I think is a good thing. Um, yeah, but we do ad sales. We also do, affiliate sales, the same thing that the YouTubers do. If you like the article, what we're write about, we'll put like an Amazon link and a Newegg link, and we have a whole system for that. And our publisher, they organize all of that, and they have a system for that. And we just put the code in, and it just works and whatever. I think a lot of YouTubers use Genius for their click-throughs. So you get customized links based on um, what geolocation you are.
Yep.
So yeah, that's how we make money. So somebody's talking about we need less RGB content on YouTube. Now, I've probably missed the boat for this, but I kind of want to do an article where I say I have the ultimate RGB PC, and I have a graphics card in there from AMD, graphics card in there from Nvidia, and I have a graphics card in there from Intel, a Larrabee. But yeah, a
They
Xeon
pop
5.
up on eBay every now and then, but they go for a lot.
Well, I mean, I've seen some of the early Xeon 5s for $100,
Yeah.
$120,
Well, that's
and
not
they're bright.
technically a graphics card, though.
Yeah, I know, but I've got my PCI as RGB. I mean,
uh,
good luck finding drivers that work for it as well. So,
oh my goodness! All right, any more questions from the chat that are worthwhile and amazing and or interesting? Depending on how long the lockdown goes, we may be doing this again soon. Oh Lord.
Ivan Dimitrov says, "Look at Serve the Home, for example. I think you'd be better than Patrick on video. Don't forget the British accent. Some people really don't like my accent." Yeah, I've done videos with you before. I've done one with PC World. I did one with uh, Team Tech GB or Tech Team GB, and people just complained because they didn't like my accent.
People will complain about anything. Like
Oh
people
yeah,
still, yeah. I mean,
oh my
they
God.
literally complain about everything. There's because my voice sounds like really horrible. There are people that are like, what is wrong with your voice? And it's like, I just sound like that. It's not the microphone. I just sound like I've got gravels in my mouth. I'm sorry.
You're chain smoking. You have to stop chain smoking, Wendell.
Yeah. Lately, I've been breathing plaster dust because I'm working on my house, and so it's like I need to cut a hole in this wall, and it's like
And you can't find any N95 respirators.
no, I've plenty of those, but that was from before the thing. So, nervous laughter.
Jedi Master Zon keeps asking about Picard. I've seen the first 4 episodes. I think it's great.
I have now watched all the episodes. It's okay. Like it could have been so much more, and then they just kind of. You've got some, no spoilers. There's some things that happen. It's fine. It's okay. It's something to fill the hours.
To be fair, I've just finished watching Tiger King.
That's like white trash Game of Thrones.
It's fantastic, and it just gets worse and worse and better and better. It's yeah, and all the memes that are going out about Carol Baskin. Yes, I have seen those, and I have opinions on those. And the opinion's probably the same as everybody else. It's just weird.
That guy got the thing in prison too, so that's not good.
Oh yeah, I saw that. He's got the human day zero flaw.
Yeah, that's not good.
Uh, I'm Scottish. I don't recognize your accent. So my accent is so okay. Let me put it this way. I first 10 years I grew up in Essex. Then I spent 8 years in Cambridgeshire. Then I spent 4 years in Yorkshire. Then I spent 4 years in Oxford. So people from those areas can tell when I say certain words in those accents. So it's let's see if I can put on a proper Hull accent. So the problem is, no, he got a problem with the bands. Cup of tea time.
which
It's
which
all
which accent involves not pronouncing T's?
I, I that's not the now I'm on the spot. I can't do accents. I can't think accents. Normally I'm fairly all right with accents. Um,
I can
yeah.
only do hillbilly and extreme hillbilly. Those are the only two that I can do.
I think yeah. Yorkshire is God's country. I even though it was in Hull, and Hull is just one letter away from hell. Um, you know, it's I liked it. They have one of the best chemistry departments in the country, and that's kind of why I went there. And it's good. It's I'm glad that I lived. I don't know for the US. It's like kind of like living in the South, except that I'm happy that I lived in the North for a while.
Oh
It
wait, I
it
forgot. I forgot. I can do hillbilly, extreme hillbilly, and sling blade.
what?
Sling blade? It's the movie. French
No.
fried potatoes.
Oh no no. See,
Mhm.
thing is, I lived in Southend for 10 years, so I got a proper Southend accent, and my sisters all do that Southend in it accent. So
Definitely part of the accent is also the rate at which you speak because I
yeah.
always like growing up. I would say something and people would stare at me and be like, "What'd you just say?" And it's like because I was speaking so rapidly, it was just sounds like clicks and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen some Cavium X2 CPUs go through eBay recently for not much, but I can't find any motherboards. Yes, I have that problem as well. The problem I have is that the Thunder X2 CPUs on eBay are only on sale in the US.
Yeah.
So, just for the collection, wouldn't actually use them. But hey, yes, snap ending in it.
The British accent is that the I can't
Oh,
I don't know
oh, British
British. Yeah, there's no. It's like
in it.
it's like little guttural component. It's a
Yeah.
different kind of guttural though than the really deep. I reckon y'all got any more of them roasting yours? Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on Risk Five. Microcontroller, perfect. Anything high performance? No,
I think
simple.
the applications that Microsoft compiled to run natively on the Qualcomm thing, it was a reasonable experience. Like the Surface, what is that? The Surface X, Surface X Pro.
Yeah,
Uh,
but
but
that's on ARM.
everything else was just not great.
Yeah, the translation from x86 to ARM is still only 32-bit. We're still waiting for the 64-bit translation to come through, because that's ultimately what's needed. I I mean, I have one of the Snapdragon 850 systems. I have that Yoga book, and the problem is, yeah, half my software doesn't run. The issue I have is Dropbox doesn't run properly.
Mm.
You get the basic version of Dropbox that you can't just make available a complete um, folder offline. You have to do it file by file. Which
Mm.
if you're sharing programs between um, you know program software has 100 different files for different things. So it's yeah. If Google, so Google Drive is the usual platform that everybody uses, that people use for online storage. Well, there's a business version called Drive File Stream, That doesn't work at all. Last time I checked. So if they want it to promote it for business uses, they need to get the business version of Drive File Stream um, to work. OneDrive works fine, except that I don't have a OneDrive account, and all my business stuff is so. Uh, a few years ago, Anantech was owned by a different publisher, and we did use the OneDrive Microsoft system, and then we transitioned to the Google system. So the fact that I use Google for all that stuff and it doesn't work on Windows on Snapdragon means that it's kind of dead on arrival right
Yeah.
now. I mean, you can still run benchmarks on it and stuff, but
Yeah.
you,
Not very
re
much fun.
you really need 64-bit translation, even if you take a 50% performance hit.
I saw one other topic in your list that we didn't get to yet, and we should. In like, well, I was planning on leaving at about 7:30, so it gives us about 10 minutes. But it's why now is the right time to buy a workstation CPU, and I'll preface that by saying the 32 core Threadripper. So I've got two 32 core Threadripper systems that I've been doing stuff on for the last few weeks, and it is a joy to use. Like it has been a long time since I have been that happy using workstations to do stuff, and it's because it just shrugs off everything that I throw at it. And even when I'm horribly abusing the system in the background, the system remains perfectly usable. And I know that's not just the Threadripper CPU; it's also the version of the Linux kernel that I'm using, and all this other kind of stuff. But multiple virtual machines running in the background also doing terrible things to the system and like getting real work done, and just the system getting out of the way and letting me do my stuff without getting weird or unresponsive. Good lord, it's a nice experience. It has single-handedly kept me sane these last few weeks.
It's the reason why I said it's now the right time to buy a workstation CPU is because both the next generation from Intel and AMD are at least a year out.
Yeah.
That's what it is. People say, well, why don't I wait 3 months for the next generation, or why don't I wait 6 months for the next generation? You're not going to get an extra generation from either AMD or Intel for at least another year. That's why now is the right time to buy a workstation CPU.
It's
It,
glorious.
it doesn't matter whether you want Intel, it doesn't matter whether you want AMD, it doesn't matter whether you want, you know, RDIMM support or any of the fancy stuff. If you find what's right for you, now is the right time to buy because there's nothing around the corner for 2020. By the end of 2020, we may see some of the Zen 3. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Epic, and Ryzen is going to kind of launch at the same time there.
Yeah.
I have that feeling. So we might see some Milan chips, but there won't be workstation, Threadripper class
Yeah.
that early, and goodness knows what Intel's going to do. Um, they, this is the worst time for Intel's roadmap because nobody knows what's going on aside from Tiger Lake for mobile at the end of the year. Cooper Lake, the next generation 14 nanometer Xeon, is essentially being neutered to only priority customers like Facebook. So they're waiting on Ice Lake Xeon, and that keeps threatening to maybe come out, and we don't know what that's going to do on the 10 nanometer process. Sapphire Rapids isn't due out. Intel has to meet a contract deadline for the Aurora supercomputer by the end of 2021 with Sapphire Rapids. So even if they do that with ES CPUs, chances are that won't actually be on full-on retail or general availability until 2022. By which time we'll probably have Genoa on the AMD side. Yeah, we're 4 months into 2020, and I don't see any other workstation CPUs coming out the rest of the year. So if you need one now, you don't need to wait around. Just buy it. Oh wait, no, that's a phrase from another publication.
Well, I think in fairness,
Oh,
the thing that you were just going to buy was not out yet. Meanwhile, you and I have been kicking the tires on Threadripper trying to find anything wrong with it or anything. Just it's like, oh yeah, for this edge case, it's not working that great. But I've the largest project that I could find, and I would love to tell you who it was for, but I can't tell you who it was for. But it involves like their build system involves a lot of developers working on a lot of software across a lot of platforms, and a lot of their automated testing and regression tests need to test a whole bunch of different architectures. And that, even with that, I only managed to use 192 gigabytes of memory. So the 256 gig memory limit, not too bad. I was also helping Eric Raymond with the thing, and he far exceeded 256 gigs on his thing because he's doing repo surgeon. But he ended up
Yep.
refactoring his application in such a way that it fits in 256 gig. But even when it didn't, we just threw a 500 gig Optane drive in there, and even though the throughput of Optane is nowhere near main memory, having half the latency and the endurance of it, the fact that there wasn't really, quote unquote, that much memory, it was basically fine using an Optane device to swap even with the 256 gig memory limitation. If I were doing that in production, I probably would go epic. But I just, like, for me, for my workstation, 128 gigs of memory and all the stuff that I do, it's a joy to use.
Um, to be honest, because Intel went higher on the ZMW this time around, I'm pretty sure AMD for next generation Threadripper will double the memory.
Yeah. Well, if RAM manufacturers, I think it looks to me like from looking at a pinout that the processor, the 3950 or 3960, 70, and 90 should probably support 512 gigabytes of memory because that would be 16 gig chips in a quad rank configuration. And
Yep.
it looks like there's enough of an interface to do that, but no one's manufacturing that yet, to my knowledge.
It's actually so when we get the high density chips, it should be fine. It should work. Though interestingly, I should show you this. Let me get it over here. Here you go. You need 256 gig of memory.
Yeah,
That's all you
yeah.
need.
Yeah.
It's no, seriously, that's a 128 gig in one module. LR DIMMs. I
I
managed
need
to,
the channels for the improved throughput though.
yeah. Have I gone out of focus? Yeah.
You have, yeah.
That's
It's
that's my camera.
confused.
We were talking before we got the stream started that I need a better camera.
Yes.
Anyway.
That's
Huh.
exciting. Well, I think that's probably about it for this stream. So tell everybody I've got your Twitter link in the description so they can follow you on Twitter. But did you set up a YouTube channel?
Um, not not one I want to publicize yet.
Okay, well that's fine. Well, they can find you on Twitter. And you want to plug anywhere else, or like
At anantech.com, twitter.com/Ian Cutress. Um, I'll update the video, help Wendell out. Um, yeah.
I don't think the
And
algorithm really cares anymore. They're just like, I can't, like, the algorithm's analyzing the transcript of this, and it's like, I don't know what's going on here. Let's relegate this channel to the waste bin. It's like, no, it's fine.
yeah, it's funny. It's people talk about being demonetized for saying certain things in videos. I think the algorithm takes into account how many times you've been demonetized before,
Yes, yes, it
and that
does.
factors how well you get demonetized in the future. And I don't think some YouTubers realize that. So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I would say that's true. Your focus still has never recovered. That's
no,
just.
it's
Oh no! Technology
C.
fails us.
I think this is a C920. So, yeah,
Thanks,
5 years
Logitech.
old. Hey, $20.
Could be worse. All right. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll catch you later.
See you. Bye.